Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is when I think Harry Potter movies entered their serious mode. Now Voldemort is back and these kids are starting to grow up, so they're done waiting for adults to help them and take things into their own hands. It's an exciting moment in the franchise that I was really happy to revisit and reflect on, not just from today's perspective, but also from an adult's perspective, since when I first watched these movies, I was still a kid just like them. But first things first, how does it hold up in 2025? Right from the first couple of minutes, I was reminded that this wasn't gonna be your average Harry Potter movie. We're in the action so quickly. I mean, if you ignore the title screens, it only takes 2 minutes and 45 seconds until Harry Potter gets attacked by Dementors. And it's not like this was just a quick teaser. After 5 minutes and 50 seconds, he gets expelled from school, and after about 9 minutes, he's with the other wizards flying to the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. We never got to the action so quickly in Harry Potter movie, and the movie achieves this by fully utilizing what the other movies have built, and for the first time just assumes that you've watched all the other movies. I feel like all the other Harry Potter movies were produced in a way that the movie could also be viewed individually. But with this one, I think you would be pretty lost if you haven't seen the other movies. And sure, for all the people that watched this as their first Harry Potter movie, that's pretty annoying, but I think at this point it's far more valuable to make a movie for the Harry Potter fans. I mean, just take a look at the Order of the Phoenix. Most of its members are people that we've met throughout the other movies. We got Mad-Eye Moody, the entire Weasley family, Sirius Black, and even Professor Lupin is back. And all of them don't get an introduction, they're just there and you're expected to know who they are. This is a very important change when you want to start building towards the climax of the franchise, which is something that looking back, I value this movie a lot more for.
And well done, everyone. Great work.
Another thing that's important when building towards the climax is having these kids grow up and getting to know more of them. In the last movies, it's really been basically Harry, Ron, and Hermione. But in this movie, we get to know so much more of them through the idea of Dumbledore's army, which is so cool, by the way. Finally, these kids aren't fighting snakes with swords or throwing rocks at werewolves, but are preparing for a war between wizards by learning and practicing their combat spells. It's also so satisfying to have Harry transition into the teacher role.
There's something that matters even more. Believing in yourself.
But speaking of combat spells, this is the first Harry Potter movie where the wizards don't have to say all the spells out loud. From a lore perspective, I couldn't find any reason for why that is. We don't get any explanation in the movie, and I think there's also nothing about this in the books. So let me know if you know anything more about this. But it's actually not necessarily something that I really like. I think it takes away from the intricacies of a well thought out magic system. For example, the most powerful spell seems to be this. But I would imagine that for the casual viewer, this version is better, and it makes it a lot easier to have intense action scenes where many spells get cast. But having said all these positive things, there are some things that do really annoy me about this movie. First of all, the general plot can be summarized like this.
He's not back. He's back.
Like, why does the Ministry of Magic do such dumb things in this movie, to the point where they're basically the villain for the first 2 hours? And having them basically be the villain for most of the movie, although they're not actually the main villain in this movie, I think creates a bit of a pacing issue. Once Dolores Umbridge was captured, the main problem was basically resolved, but because the movie can't be over at this point, Harry decides to go on this really dumb rescue mission. Now this rescue mission does lead to an amazing final battle, but I don't like how they got there, that's all I'm saying. The second thing that annoyed me was how Dumbledore decides that avoiding Harry is the best strategy to help him.
I thought by distancing myself from you, as I have done all year, you'd be less tempted.
I mean, even this kid, Luna Lovegood, was smart enough to figure out that Voldemort probably wants Harry to feel alone.
If I were you-know-who, I'd want you to feel cut off from everyone else.
Sure, these problems aren't that bad, but they are two fundamental issues for me that influence the entire movie, which is really a shame because otherwise this would have had potential to be my favorite Harry Potter movie. I mean, we get to see scenes like when Hermione and Ron have a little duel. It's something that could have easily been cut because it doesn't matter for the rest of the movie, but it's things like this that I want to see as a Harry Potter fan. It's a bit of a fan service that really wasn't that common back then. Oh, and I also hate the romance between Harry and this girl. I mean, their kiss just says it all. I think I've never seen a kiss with less chemistry between two people. I know this doesn't really fit in the flow of this video, but neither does it in the movie, so moving on. What I haven't touched on so far is the CGI, and I've never had a problem with the CGI in Harry Potter, and I think all the movies so far have held up pretty good even for today's standards. But the CGI in this movie not only holds up, but actually surpasses many movies from today. Coming out in 2007, this movie was released in what felt like the golden age of CGI. It's the same year that Transformers released, and we also had Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest at this point. Although technology has come a lot further today, this era of movies often had better CGI than movies nowadays, and Harry Potter 5 is no exception. And the best example for the great CGI also brings me to my top 3 scenes in this movie, because the first scene is the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort. To this day, even with all the Fantastic Beasts movies, this stands as the best wizarding duel in all of Harry Potter. It has such an amazing dynamic, such clever spells, great effects. They use water, fire, and have amazing spell animations. It really is the highlight in this movie for me, and I'll take it as payback for all the times I complained about the final battle not using enough magic. The second scene is far less substantial, but it still made me laugh, and it's when Snape replies to not becoming teacher of defense against the dark arts.
But you were unsuccessful?
Obviously.
Alan Rickman as Snape doesn't get so much to do in this movie, but all the scenes he's in, he just kills as always. Just the way he replies to everything, I just love it. My third favorite scene is how Ron stands up for Harry.
Do you believe the rubbish he's come out with about you know who?
Yeah, I do. Has anyone else got a problem with Harry?
Coming from the last movie where Ron and Harry had some beef, this is just so satisfying to see how Ron stands up for Harry when Harry is having a hard time. And that actually brings me to my experience of this movie from an adult's perspective. Because as I said before, through the concept of Dumbledore's army, we got to know a lot more characters. But that also means that we can't get a lot about Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And because we don't develop their relationship, I love that their relationship in this movie is just solid.
I'm sure Harry's kissing was more than satisfactory.
We don't get many scenes between them, and that's of course because Harry is kind of going through a hard time and also isolates himself a bit. But all the scenes that we do get, Harry is actually not that nice to Ron and Hermione most of the time because he's going through a hard time. But then it's just so satisfying to see that he has these two friends with a friendship that has really held together for several years now. And I love that Ron and Hermione support him in these tough times. And when you're going through a hard time, that's exactly when friendships like these matter, and I love seeing them on screen. I also love the chat we get between Harry and Sirius. In this movie, I think Harry for the first time is kind of unsure if he's actually a good person, especially because this movie really emphasizes the connection he has to Voldemort. And then I just love how Sirius explains to him that every person could be good and every person could be bad, because we all have good and bad within ourselves. But what matters is the part we decide to act on.
We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on.
I mean, by now you guys maybe know that I love to talk about choice. I mean, I made a whole video about that in The Matrix. And this is another message that kind of falls in that category, and I love it so much because it's all about choice. You have the potential to be a good person and you have the potential to be a bad person. But the important part is what you decide, what you choose to act upon. And another thing that stood out to me, or that I appreciated a lot more as an adult, is also the speech Harry gives about friendship in the end.
You're the weak one, and you'll never know love or friendship.
I love it when the protagonist in a movie kind of wins through a unique way. I mean, in this case, Harry is physically losing the fight, but mentally he's winning, and that is so powerful. And that's why I like it from the cinematic perspective, but of course the message behind it is also great. I mean, in the movie, this is kind of where Harry differentiates between him and Voldemort and how they're not the same, because Harry values friendships and would really do anything for his friends. But if you take a step back and apply this message kind of to the real world, it means that no matter how much power or money or wealth or influence you have, it doesn't matter if you don't have love and friendships in your life. So yeah, from an adult's perspective, I think there are a lot of deeper meanings and messages in this movie that I valued a lot more as an adult, and as a kid probably didn't even really notice, or at least didn't value them as much. And overall, this movie I think holds up great from today's perspective. I mean, the deeper messages make it great to watch it as an adult in 2025, but also generally the CGI holds up amazing, or as I said, even surpasses many movies nowadays. I think this movie makes some core changes compared to the other Harry Potter movies that I really like and I think are really important when you're starting to build towards the climax of Harry Potter. Let me know your thoughts on Harry Potter 5 in the comments below and what other movies we should revisit from today's perspective, and I'll see you in the next one.